Hey everybody, so we are continuing along today with our season previews for the upcoming 2019-2020 season, and today we're going to do the Buffalo Sabres. Before we get into the video, I just quickly want to say that if you're not yet a subscriber to this channel, please hit that subscribe button for great hockey content all year long. And if you enjoy this video, please hit the thumbs up and give it a like. That really helps out the channel a lot. So the Buffalo Sabres, Buffalo, a team that I still think is a rebuilding team. I have very low expectations for this year. I don't think they're really going to do anything in that division. They're not better than any of the top 4 or 5 teams in that division, and I don't think it's even close. They've got, obviously, just signed Jeff Skinner to that massive contract extension. Jack Eichel's still the leader of the team. And they've got a lot of young pieces in place there, but I just don't think that they are ready yet. And as we look at their lineup, I will talk more about why. So now for the line combinations, I took these directly from Daily Faceoff because quite honestly, I have no idea how to piece this lineup together. There's a lot of potential changes to this roster, to this lineup. They kind of have a lot of players who I think are competing for spots. I think this in training camp and this preseason, there's going to be a lot of spots up for grabs as far as this roster goes, and who ends up being at the NHL level, who ends up back in the AHL. They have a lot of players signed. So, top line, Jeff Skinner, Jack Eichel, and Sam Reinhart. I think overall that's a very good top line. There's obviously a ton of talent there. And then Skinner's only 27, Eichel's 22, Reinhart's 23. So there's a lot of young talent there. And that line, I think, will produce points. And that's not going to be the problem with this team. The problem is going to come the rest of the lineup. Second line, I have Connor Sheary. Well, I don't. Daily Faceoff does, because there's so many guys that can play, the left side or the right side, or they can play center or wing, and there's a lacking of right wings on this team and a lot of left wings. And putting this lineup together was very difficult, so I just took one that was already done. Connor Sheary, Casey Middlestat, and Kyle Okposo may not play that high up in the lineup. Okposo has been a real disappointment with Buffalo for sure. When he left the New York Islanders, he was one of the top free agents of that summer. That was a few years ago now. And he signed a big contract with Buffalo. And he has, between injuries and just not playing well, Okposo's really struggled since going to Buffalo. He only had 14 goals last year. He may not play that high up in the lineup. That spot might end up going to a younger up-and-coming prospect or something like that. But for now, we'll put Okposo there. The third line, Jimmy Vesey coming over from the New York Rangers, Evan Rodriguez and Marcus Johansson coming over from Boston. That leaves the fourth line with Vladimir Sobotka, Zemgus Girgensons, and Johan Larsson. This team is just straight up lacking offense. They are lacking offense. Outside of that top line, Skinner was a 40-goal guy last year. I don't think Skinner scores 40 again this year. If you look at Jeff Skinner's stats throughout his career, year by year, he is very inconsistent. He will put up a massive year, and then he'll follow it up with a good, not nearly as good, but a good. He doesn't have bad seasons where he scores 15 goals or anything, but he doesn't tend to put high production years back to back. If he scores 40 one year, you're probably only going to see 28 to 30 goals the next. He doesn't put those 40 goal years back to back very often. He tends to drop off and then pick back up again and then drop off. And we saw that even within last season. At the beginning of last year, Jeff Skinner was absolutely on fire. The second half of the season, he was not nearly the same player. And I think we're going to see that again this year, just on a year-to-year basis. I don't think he scores 40 again. I think if I had to put a goal total on what I think Jeff Skinner scores this year, I'm going to say 32. So there's a prediction for you. I think Jeff Skinner scores 32 goals this year. But the top line is going to produce points. There's too much talent there not to. After that, though, I mean, Okposo's been a huge disappointment. Casey Middlestat, he's only 20 years old. I don't know if he's ready to be a full second line center yet. He had 25 points last year. I mean, that's not anything spectacular. Is he ready for a top six role down the middle at the NHL level at only 20 years old? Connor Sherry, he's an interesting guy because he can put up goals. He can be a very good goal scorer, but he's largely reliant on the people around him. And I think we saw that a lot in Pittsburgh, where when he was playing with top tier players and playing with Crosby and, had all that talent around him, he could put up points, but he's not going to do it on his own. He needs, those other players around him to be highly talented. And I just don't think Buffalo has the NHL-ready talent right now to make Connor Sherry a great player. So we'll see what you get out of him. Now, the third line, Jimmy Vesey. Jimmy Vesey, I think, so far for his NHL career, has been a huge disappointment. If you remember when Vesey came out of Harvard and was first signing in the NHL, he made a big deal about how he wasn't going to sign in Nashville. There was these huge Jimmy Vesey sweepstakes. When he came out of Harvard, people were expecting him to be a 25, 30 goal scorer. Jimmy Vesey had 17 goals last year, and he's never scored 20 in a season. So he's been disappointing in my mind for all the hype around him when he came out of college versus what he's been at the NHL level, which is a bottom six secondary scorer. He's been disappointing. And Evan Rodriguez, I mean, he's a good player, but he's a bottom six player, 29 points last year. Marcus Johansson can be very good. He was very good for Boston in the playoffs this past year. He's struggled with injury, so he cannot stay healthy. He doesn't seem to be able to put a full season together. And, he had 30 points in the regular season last year. He only played 58 games. He's got to stay healthy if he's going to be a big-time contributor to this team. If he can get back to being a 20 to 25 goal scorer, I think he could help this team a lot. If he only plays 50 games and has, 12 goals, that's not really helping with this situation in Buffalo. And then the fourth line, you're just not going to get any offense really from these guys. Johan Larsson does not put up points. Zemgus Girgensson, less than 20 points last year. Vladimir Sobotka is not an offensive guy at all anymore. I think this team's lacking offense. Just being 100% honest, they are lacking offensive production for sure outside of that top line. And in a division with Tampa Bay and Boston and Toronto and now Florida getting better and, should be significantly improved, you're not going to beat those teams with this type of forward group. You're just not. And that's not even their biggest problem in my mind. So moving on to the defense. Now, defense is somewhere I do think they have improved. Colin Miller's a nice addition. Brandon Montour, getting him last year, I think was a very good move. Rasmus Dahlin, obviously, is going to be a superstar in this league. So defense is somewhere I actually like where Buffalo is going. So Rasmus Ristolainen has demanded a trade, apparently. He's one of the biggest trade rumors going on in the NHL at this point. But so far, he has not actually been moved, and for right now, he's on the Buffalo Sabres roster. So he'll play on the top pair with Rasmus Dahlin if he is not traded before the start of the season. That is a whole situation going on between the team and the player there, and we're just going to have to wait and see what happens if Buffalo actually does move him or if he begrudgingly gets stuck staying in Buffalo, at least for the rest of this contract. But that is a good young top pair with the Sabres, with Dahlin and Ristolainen. Second pair, Jake McCabe. Jake McCabe I actually like a lot. I think he can be a pretty darn good defenseman in this league as he starts to come into his prime years here. And Brandon Montour, I think that was a great pickup from Anaheim for the Buffalo Sabres. leaving Marco Scandella and Colin Miller as your bottom pair. I'm a big Colin Miller fan. I do think he's not a top level defenseman, but I think he can give you good production, especially offensive production from a bottom three type role in your defense core. And then we have the goaltending situation, and this is, I think, the biggest problem for the Buffalo Sabres. Carter Hutton and Linus Ullmark both had goals against averages over 3 goals a game last year. That's not going to cut it in the NHL, and that is certainly not going to cut it in a division with as many good teams as the Atlantic Division has. They have got to figure out this goaltending situation. Carter Hutton was brought over after a great season as the St. Louis Blues semi-starter a couple years ago. He was mainly the backup, but Jake Allen, he played so much better than Jake Allen. He ended up kind of taking over there. And he got the big contract last summer before this past season to be the starter here in Buffalo, and he was not all that great as the starter in Buffalo. Goals against average of 3, save percentage of only .908, and he had an 18-30 record. I mean, that's just not that good. And then Linus Ullmark, I mean, he's a backup. He's a backup goaltender. He played 37 games last year. His goals against average was 3.11, and his save percentage was .905. I mean, when both your goaltenders are giving up 3 goals a game, you're not going to win many games in the NHL. So goaltending is a huge, huge problem for this team, I think. And one of the main reasons I don't think Buffalo is nearly at that level that the other top teams in the Atlantic are. So that's what you've got, for a starting lineup. But however, as I said earlier, I think there's going to be a lot of competition in training camp this year and a lot of roster spots up for grabs because Buffalo has a lot of other players that could potentially take roster spots. Tage Thompson, Curtis Lazar, Victor Olofsson, and Scott Wilson will also be fighting for spots in that forward group, that top 12 forward group. I think Tage Thompson has a good chance to probably get into this lineup at some point. Victor Olofsson, a young prospect type guy, and then Lazar and Wilson are kind of those bottom 6, fourth line fill-in type players. And then on the back end, they also have a lot of guys on the back end. Zach Bogosian is on the injured list right now, but when Zach Bogosian's healthy, he comes in and is looking for a top 6 spot in that defense core. Matt Hunwick could potentially be the 7th defenseman. Then they picked up Henry Yokiharu from Chicago this offseason. They added John Gilmore from the New York Rangers, who put up a ton of points in the AHL with the Hartford Wolfpack last year. However, defense, actually playing defense, is a huge problem for Gilmore, as his plus-minus rating has been absolutely horrendous through most of his pro career. So there's a lot of guys fighting for roster spots on this team. And it's going to be interesting to watch them in the preseason and see, who plays well, who doesn't, and how this lineup actually turns out. There's a lot of players there that could potentially move around and take different spots in the lineup. But overall, Buffalo's just not there yet. They're not there yet. There's some good young pieces. There's some good young talent. But between the goaltending situation and I think the lack of overall offense, I think Buffalo's in for another long year and probably going to finish in 6th or 7th in that division. It's just too much missing. There's too much missing right now. So with that, like, comment, share, subscribe, follow on social media. All those links are down in the description below. If you'd like to further support the channel, the links to our Patreon and merchandise store are down in the description as well. Keep spreading the word about this channel. Let's keep this thing growing. Thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll talk to you guys soon.